this video, we'll be continuing our discussion on using the brain button after the flop. If you haven't watched the first video on using the brain button after the flop, you should watch that first. We're going to start with the third page here. On this page, we'll look at some additional factors to consider that are similar to those we considered pre-flop, but with a few differences, so we'll go over them all again. Your absolute position tells you when you have to act compared to the other players. The player in the small blind will always be first to act, and the player on the button is always going to be last to act. But for the other positions, it's not so simple. Say you are in early position and you raise. You get called by only the blinds. In this case, even though you were in early position pre-flop, you are now the last to act after the flop. This next box tells us very simply, if we check or call at this point, will the betting round end immediately? If not, this box will say no, to alert us that we might want to think twice about calling that bet, since someone on our left might make a raise after us. The action status shows you a summary of your opponent's actions up to this point, such as whether there have been any bets or raises. Occasionally, it will indicate that the player with the lead made the bet. The player with the lead is defined as the player who made the last raise on the previous betting round. In other words, they were the most likely aggressor at this point. They might have a big hand, or they might just be making a continuation bet, which is a term we cover in other videos. Here we see the pot size, given in both dollars and big blinds. And over here we see your stack size, also given in dollars and big blinds, and how big your stack is relative to the pot size. This last number is the most important one, because it indicates how much more you have left to invest in value bets or bluffs on future streets. That number is best measured relative to the size of the pot. Finally, on this page, we see the pot odds. Like pre-flop, this is simply how much money is in the pot compared to how much it will cost you to call when you're facing a bet. Suppose on the river there was $50 in the pot. Someone bets another $50. So now there's $100 in the pot, and it costs you $50 to call. The pot odds are 2 to 1, meaning if you lost twice and won once, you'd break even. 100 to 50 is 2 to 1. And this last page is called Opponent Profiles. The boxes at the top tell us about the player with the lead. Once again, the player with the lead just means the player who made the last raise on the previous betting round, also known as the previous street. If no one made a raise on the previous street, then no one has the lead. These boxes tell us who has the lead, where they are, and what action they've taken so far. Where they are is often a critical factor, especially in relation to your other opponents. If the player with the lead is on your right, that's good, because they have to act before you. If they're on your left, that's often a disadvantage to you, unless you intend to check raise them and catch other opponents in the middle. The final box is the same one we saw pre-flop, but it only includes opponents that still have cards. We can look at each bar to determine how loose or tight our opponents are, how passive or aggressive our opponents are, and finally, the skill level of our remaining opponents. Even though all this information is shown here in aggregate, your advisor is actually looking at each opponent individually and considering how each factor might give us clues as to what that opponent is holding, and how well the board cards are likely to have matched up with each opponent's probable range of hands. Unlike pre-flop, here we can see how they applied this information by pressing the Show Range button. The Show Range button is the most powerful tool of all, and we'll talk about it more in the next video. Thanks for watching, and thanks for being a member of Advanced Poker Training.